Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a live demo, Gen AI hacks for enterprise architecture productivity. So good afternoon to those who are joining us in Australia, and warm welcome to our viewers tuning in from different time zones. So please introduce yourselves in the comments. Let us know what you do and where you're watching us from. So there is so many Gen AI tools constantly evolving, but are you actually using them to boost your productivity as enterprise architect? We actually ran a quick poll on LinkedIn. You can see the results on the screen, and you can see majority of people at least experimenting. And there is definitely some people who feel like it's a total game changer. So if you're watching us live or maybe you're watching replay, please put in the comments, what do you feel like? Do you feel like you're boosting your productivity with AI tools, or maybe not yet? Would love to hear your comments. Or at least say hi in the comments so we know that you're here. So anyway, with all that excitement, with all the AI tools, knowing which tool to use for which task can be overwhelming. So that's why Brian is doing a live demo today showing real enterprise architecture use cases and how different AI tools can streamline workflows, speed up analysis, and improve decision making. So hopefully today's session will give you some practical, ready-to-go tips that you can implement straight away. So we encourage you to engage with us by posting your questions in the comments. We'll try to address as many questions as we can. We have 45 minutes today for Brian's demo, and we'll sure to follow up afterwards of anything we don't have a chance to answer live. So I'm Jana Martins, I'm talent community lead here at FromHereOn, and as usual, excited to introduce our Chief AI Officer, Brian Lowe, that brings wealth of knowledge and practical approach to today's hot topic. So anyway, without any further delays, I'm pass it on to Brian to run this demo today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome once again. For those who haven't been in our previous sessions, I'm Brian Lowe, Chief AI Officer here at FromHereOn. So I get to play with all of the fun tools as well as do serious work as well. So today we're going to have a chat to just a whistle-stop tour, if you like, of some of the productivity aspects that we can get out of AI, keeping in mind, of course, that these tools change very, very quickly. And I'll go in a little bit to how that's working as well. Perhaps, Jana, we can bring up the slide presentation if we could.
Yes, just acknowledging a few people saying hi to us. Thank you so much for saying hi. Then we can see that you're here and actually watching us. We're not just here, two of us talking about AI tools.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for attending. We'll look at questions as we go along in the chat, but also when we get to the end, we'll have a Q&A session as well and see if we can answer most of your questions. All right, let's jump in if we can. So the objectives for today, as I said, it's just a whistle-stop tour. We're going to go through an overview of some of what's out there. Obviously, a lot of these things you guys will have seen before, played with to some extent. As we saw in the poll that Jana brought up before, it looks like most of you have at least started playing with things. Some of you are characterizing this as a game changer. So, I perceive from that you've gone into the deeper details. And how much that impacts you we'll try and shape it accordingly. In terms of what I'm trying to do is just show you a little bit of what's out there rather than specific tools. This is not going to be a tutorial session on different tools. We're just trying to introduce classes of tools, classes of use cases, if you like, that are germane to enterprise architecture and the way in which some of these tools can help you do what you're doing on a daily basis. We also want to get some feedback from you. That's why the question and answer session, and also following up, send us any information that you think would be useful, things you'd like to see more of. We continue to do these sessions all of the time. So, ideas for our next session, deeper dive questions, things that you found that we need maybe to come back and look at more closely. And then talk a little bit about us as well. As I said before, this is not a tutorial session. We really just want to give you an idea of the categories. So if we move to the next slide, Jana, if we could. This is just a cover slide. I won't spend too much time on this. I update this slide occasionally, once a month at the moment, because there's always something new coming out. And this is what this slide's really supposed to represent is, 2021, we just had some nascent publishing of some of the large language models and transformer architectures in general. And then in a very short space of time, it ramped up quite quickly. Now we've got Agentic AI solutions like Manus coming out. We've got Claude 3.7. I think that's out 2 or 3 weeks ago now, which is exceptional at writing code. We've got the new ChatGPT 4.5. It's a bit of a meh, but nevertheless, lots and lots of activity. So the idea is you need to keep up with what's going on. Whatever I show you here today, 3 months down the track, 1 month down the track, I'm probably going to have to do this session again. So, continue to keep an eye on things, but hopefully we'll give you a little bit of an illustration today. All right, next slide if we could, Jana. So I didn't want to put like a capability model for enterprise architecture or something technical in front of you. What I've done is split things up into 3 broad categories of what enterprise architects do. The first one, of course, is understanding things. So the idea there is you're analyzing things, you're reading documentation, you're probing into what's going on in the business and within the technology landscape and analyzing and pulling that stuff out. In addition to that, of course, you're solutioning. So what does the target state look like? If we're using the buyouts model, if you're a TOGAF fan, then, business all the way through to technology and platforms. What does that look like? Are there transition architectures? What's the, canonical data model look like? Governance, all of those kinds of things. What does that look like in solutioning in that space? And then finally, and I think really very importantly, communicating. You're attending meetings all the time. If you're an EA, you're drawing information out of people's heads. You're also taking them on the journey and so forth. And I've got a few call outs there that are my suggestions as to, where you're going to be able to pull out really, game-changing EA tools or AI tools that work in EA that will help you quite a lot. Beyond things like obvious transcription in meetings, for example, if you're using Fireflies or Copilot, and other sort of more obvious things, through to slightly more advanced techniques as well. So that's the structure. There's a quick aside here that I wanted to make before we jump in, and I've got a little example on the screen there, but the point of this is models are not tools. Right, that's an important thing, and it probably is obvious to many of you, but it is confusing because sometimes some of the tools are the same as the models that are using. So Llama would be a good example there, or even Grok. But some of the tools have different kinds of models. So the two that jump out are obviously Perplexity. Perplexity is one that I use quite a lot, and you can select which model you want to use, and you can select the most appropriate for the particular query or task that you're putting together. The second one is Sim Theory. That's a little bit newer. Again, it doesn't have the same models as Perplexity. Some of the others have got multiple models, and some of them are differently named. Copilot, for example, uses GPT, sort of. I think Prometheus is the latest version, which is built on top of GPT. Anyway, that distinction there, I just wanted to make that very clear. So when you see some of the press coming out, you're clear in your mind as to the distinction. Okay, so with that, let's jump in. I'll just move that window across. You will see me looking off screen because I've got a couple of screens here that I'm going to try and work with. Jan, if we can jump into our first one. All right. So the first one, this is kind of obvious stuff. It's a little bit of hygiene stuff, but I'm just going to take you through this to reinforce some of the key learnings here. So, ChatGPT, we might jump into this. We might say something like, how do I build a conceptual data model for the enterprise? Oops, something like that, okay? And it'll come back with responses that some of you have probably seen before. It'll be fairly generic. It'll be something taken from a standard. So in this case here, it's picked up Dharma DMBOK, which is probably one that I would use. And then it's given you some fairly generic steps that you can take here, right? And then you might refine that with more queries about particular areas. It's given you some issues to be considered, etc. And then in some of the frameworks, it'll give you prompts for subsequent queries. So Perplexity, which I talked about before, it's quite good at drafting proposed next steps queries, and that interaction can get you a lot of quite valuable information. And then you do the usual thing, you copy this across and then you put it into another document and you start crafting away. So that's one way of doing this, but that way of doing things is more of operating a query engine. And it's understandable because that's what we've been trained to do for 20 years. We've been using Google and other things, mostly Google. Some people use Bing to run these query engines, and we've been very well trained as to how to do that. These things are a bit different and might be obvious to many of you, but the best way to think about these is as a blank slate personality that you can shape to what you want it to be. So your job is to gaslight this thing into believing it's what you need it to be to get the information or the task itself out of this system that you're looking for. So I'm not that great a typist, so I prepared a better query, I think, of how you might put this together. And I want to just hang a lantern on some of the salient aspects of this to start with. So first of all, you're telling it what it is. So you're giving it a perspective that it needs to come at you from, rather than just treating it as if it's a query engine that you're pulling information out of. So you're telling it you're a consultant, right? And you're working for an Australian company specializing in enterprise architecture. That's us. You're building a conceptual data model from scratch. Your client's a government-owned Australian corporation in the transport sector. I want you to write a slide pack, get the steps together for the next level of detail of a data model. Give me an output of PowerPoint as the format, and use the DMBOK framework, which it did anyway automatically, interestingly enough. Use Australian spelling. Very important nuance for those people in the Australians in the audience. You can also say use UK spelling, for example. The default, of course, with these machines is US spelling. And then the other thing is slide pack needs to generate. Did I attach? Yeah, I haven't attached the pack yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload from my computer here a presentation that I did a couple of weeks ago for Women in Architecture. I'm going to upload that there just for a style reference. So the idea here is I'm giving it a slide pack style reference to work from. And then if I send this query through, it's going to do a much better job. So the idea here is we've shaped exactly the way we want this thing to think, the kind of information we want it to draw upon, not just its entire training set, but DMBOK in particular. We've talked about conceptual data model, which is a thing that it will probably understand or find out about from its training. We've told it we want a PowerPoint output. We've told it we want it to be a consultant, so the language that it's using is going to be consulting language. We've told it to use the DMBOK framework, which I think I might have mentioned. Okay, and then lo and behold, it produces a PowerPoint here. Now, there is a bit of tidy up that you need to do, so I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to swap to one I prepared earlier, which is, where is it? There we go, which is this one here. So, Jana, can we see that on the screen?
Yep.
So, okay, just checking. So this is using the themes of the style that I used in the pack that I uploaded, and it's just outlined all of the bullet points that you saw in the previous thing there. So it's not a finished product by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a start, right? It gets the ball rolling. It's got a pack that you can then start working with. You can start adding things in. You can start modifying the text, expanding it out. And then you can go back to ChatGPT, and it's asked you here if you like to do visuals and diagrams, etc. So you can open this up, and then you can start playing with this to produce diagrams, ERDs or example ERDs, those sorts of things. So the salient point here, I guess, is use this as if it was a co-creator. Don't use it as a query engine. Use it as if it was, a person who's a blank slate that you can sort of shape into what you need, and then they will start acting the way that you want them to need. The key things here, there's a lot of prompt engineering stuff that's out there. If you Google cheat sheets, prompt cheat sheets, etc., you'll find 100 of those things. I've got one. I can circulate that if you guys would like, but there are many ones out there. The main points, I think, are, first of all, set the role or the persona of what you expect the AI to be acting as. Is it an enterprise architect? If it is there a specialist area? What sector is it working in? Those sorts of things. So set the persona, set the tone. Is it professional? Is it advisory? Is it collaborative? What is it doing? How is it doing? So be explicit about that when you're explaining your query. Describe the task very clearly. And expand on it. So something like develop a conceptual data model, you might want to dig into that using DMBOK, etc., etc. Specify the output format. A ChatGPT, at least 4.5, now does PowerPoints. Obviously, it does a range of other output formats as well, so you can structure it to that. It doesn't, to the best of my knowledge, do Visio, but I'm going to get to something that does in a second, but it will fairly shortly. Other tools, if you're looking for things like DDLs that you can suck into Irwin, for example, to do modeling, okay, that's a little bit more specialized, but we'll get to some of that. All right, and then finally set the refinements. And the refinements are things like use Australian spelling, for example, various sort of constraints that you want to put on. So be succinct, use bullet points, use a narrative structure, those kinds of refinements, which help it understand how you want to shape the output. All right, so they're the basics. I think a lot of people have already sort of got to that stage, but I thought we'd include that since we have a spectrum of people from those who are playing with it through to those who've started to use it as a game changer.
I just can't believe you have to say Australian spelling every time. You would think it was remembered.
Well, let me get to that. So that's a very good point. Thank you, Jana. In ChatGPT, you can set up projects. So when you create a project, I'll create a test project here, for example. In that, you can set up instructions which are always used in every prompt that you put through. So you could put things like always use Australian spelling. You could set up a project which is purely based on TOGAF, let's say, or maybe you're a Zachman practitioner, I'm not sure. And then, you could say you are a TOGAF practitioner. And you specialize in business architecture, something like that. And all of that goes in the instructions. And that way, every query that you put in after that, you don't have to repeat that, to Jana's point. It's automatically put into every query. And then similarly, if you use tools like Perplexity, so Perplexity is one that I use quite a lot. Perplexity has spaces, which are a very similar concept to projects in ChatGPT. I've got Chief AI Officer. I've also got FHO-EA. So this is setting up a space for enterprise architects. And the way this is configured is it primes this by telling the system, you are a enterprise architect practitioner, you're working in Australia, you're TOGAF based, et cetera, and then you can attach files as well to this, and then those files are always used. So for example, I had a style file which I attached before, but you can attach other things as well. If you're working with a particular client, you can attach some files that are central to what that client is doing. So you might attach a project file, you might attach a strategy document, something like that. And those things are always incorporated in subsequent queries. So setting up spaces or projects and whatever the equivalent is in other tools, that will save you quite a lot of time. Okay, so what I'm going to move to now, and again, I want to emphasize this is the whistle stop tour, so we can do a tutorial on each of these tools, but we're not going to do that today. I'm going to move now to Notebook LM, and the reason I'm doing that is because part of what EAs do is research. In fact, I sometimes talk about the teams doing archaeology. So, moving into a client's document corpus, or even if you're an EA practicing internally in an organization, you will have a giant corpus of legacy documentation, of course, which you have to work your way through. That's a tough task. Reading all those documents, keeping everything, making the right notes, pulling things together, managing different versions of things, particularly when you've got a corpus that hasn't been correctly managed, there'll be some information that's inaccurate. So for those sorts of things, you need to essentially dig through all that documentation. Now, Notebook LM is, strictly speaking, a research tool. It's for academic research, but in many ways, the tasks that I've just described for EAs is a research task. So this tool is quite handy, and you can load up documents here. At the moment with the tool, you can only load 20, and that's because of technical issues to do with the context window. But 20 tends to be enough for a focused area of research that you're going to be working on. So I've loaded up some documents here. They say GPT. I picked these because it's an old client called GPT that I worked with many years ago. It's not GPT as in GPT, the model. So I've loaded up a bunch of documents from a project that we were working on there. And then based on these, once they're all loaded in as sources, this is, you add sources from here. once they're all loaded in, then as per usual, you can generate a summary. And what I've done here, because we have so little time, I've actually run a lot of these queries ahead of time so that you're not sitting there waiting for things to scroll over the screen. So I'm going to jump here to the briefing document. So this is a briefing document that it is written, which summarizes all 5 of these documents, pulls the eyes out of the different sections, etc., and then you can sort of scroll through and read that. And that gives you a very good summary and at least a piece of context that you can use when you're trying to understand what's going on. And then you can start to deep dive in some of these documents. Now, this is the query window here, and you can start typing in all kinds of queries. I'm going to do one here. So the kind of thing that I would put in is something like, give me a table of application interfaces showing data flows for each one. Okay. So this is the kind of task that you would sometimes do as an EA. You're looking at your application landscape. You want to understand where the data flows are between each of them. And here we are. So this has gone through, it's scanned all of the documentation here. Some of this is pictorial documentation. I've turned it into a PDF because there are limitations with this tool. Some of it's visual information, diagrams, and some of it says presentation slides here. These are actually PowerPoint slides. There's a diagram here, and then there's an interface document. So these are all different types of documents. It's understood each of those, parsed them, and then pulled out the interface names, different modules, and then the data flows from each one. Now, it's not always 100% accurate, but it's a very good start. And you can start to populate this kind of information very rapidly with a start like this, and then go back and validate. It's also giving you links so that you can jump in, you can read the text itself, or you can open up that document and validate indeed what it says is correct. So this is a really good example of the kind of analysis tasks that you need to do as an EA when you're pulling together a large corpus of documents. You're doing that research and you're trying to dig in. So the things that I'm always looking, or I used to always look for, are things like your application portfolio information. Give me a list of applications, right? If you have the right kind of documentation, what's their business criticality? How much of a footprint do they have from an infrastructure point of view? All those kinds of things. So extracting that information can be super useful. All right, so the other one I've got here, I think I had one more query into interfaces and processes. So this is a mind map that you can generate from this. And it's a navigable mind map. So CTI interfaces is the top level, it's decided, and then you can jump into commercial management, DSR benchmark files, etc. So you can drill in and navigate this mind map diagram to understand how the information that it's extracted from that corpus hangs together. So these are quite useful tools. As I said, be careful. It's not always 100% accurate, but it's a very good start. And pulling this information out in summary in a few seconds and then validating things, or perhaps focusing on the areas you need to, is a real time saver. That's way easier than trawling through pages and pages of documents. The other feature that Notebook's got is that you can switch off documents as well. So let's say, for example, you're not quite sure of the accuracy of certain documents, or you want to focus on certain parts of the corpus. You switch those off and run the same query again. It will give you a slightly different piece of information based on the subset of that corpus. You can also add notations to it. So I'm running out of time here, but you can click on particular sources. You can add notations to them to correct some of the things that it's interpreting in that file. And then when you run queries again, you've got more corrected pieces of information. Again, these are stochastic models, so it's never an exact science. What it gives you is roughly correct. There can be some issues. Okay, so that's for document discovery, document management. Now, again, whistle-stop tour. The next one I'm going to jump into is Agentic AI. So this is to do with getting the systems to do things as opposed to just parsing things and synthesizing things. So what I've put in here, I've realized I've misspelt this. I've put in a query to Manus. Manus takes about 10, 15 minutes to run sometimes, depending on what you're asking it to do. So I've had to do this ahead of time, not to waste your time. But the first task I've given it is an entity relationship diagram task. And I've said, build an entity relationship diagram of the financial services data model. So the FSDM is one that I've worked with for many years. I want you to build a model that can be loaded into Visio. So this is the kind of thing that you might do. You might be looking at a proprietary model, for example. You might be looking at a business model. You might be looking at high-level business flows. You might be looking at value chain information, capability model information, all of those kinds of things. So the HERM is a standard relationship model that you can also use. That would be a good example. But what I've asked it to do here is a modeling task in a tool that we do in a fairly frequent basis. And I've said, go and build an EI diagram of the FSDM. So you can see here the steps that it's gone through. I'm not going to waste too much time getting into the details here, but the call out is it's done research. It's gone out there. It's found what the FSDM is in the first place. It's parsed that, tried to model it, understand it. It's pulled out high-level entities here based on what it's analyzed. And then it's realized that Visio supports 3 different types of ERD notations, right? So it's made a decision as to which one is the best to go with. It's realized that it can do a VSDX directly, which would be a file you could open up directly in Visio, or you can do something that could be imported into Visio, and it's decided by itself to do the import option. You can streamline that if you want to. And then it's built the EI diagram. What's interesting here, and just in the interest of time, I'll jump through. What's interesting here is that, so it's cited its sources, where it's got the FSDM information from. It's pulled out the key elements. It's decided it's going to support DOT, PDF, and SVG as formats for those for the exports. It's built the Visio information. It's also built a whole bunch of documentation as well. A README on what's in the package. It's documented all the entities and the relationships. It's documented the Visio import instructions, so you know how to do that, and so on and so on. So I'm just going to very quickly jump now to, and it's output the file, of course, or it's output a package. I'm going to jump here to show you the file list. These are all the files that are generated in a package, which I was then able to download and unpack. And you can see there, it's actually produced a PDF as well. So I'll jump to the PDF, and there's the visualization of the ERD that it's built for us. Okay. In addition to that, of course, if I jump to Visio here, I can go into the system here, go into Financial Services ERD, which is the package that I unpacked here. I am going to have to change this to an SVD because that's what it's generated. Open the SVG, bang. This is a fully editable ERD diagram in Visio that I can then start playing with, and I can add things to. I can change some of the relationships, etc. Now, I asked it to build an ERD, so it doesn't have attributes. This is not, a full relational model. It will build a relational model as well. If you'd like it to produce DDLs, it'll do that. These are the kinds of tasks that you can handle. All right, the second task that I gave Manus is to build me a website. Now, this one here was a little bit more complex. What I've said to it is, and I've used government sources. I like government sources because they publish everything and you can use them freely in demos like this. So I've said the Victorian Government IM3 standard, build me an interactive website that is a questionnaire to take me through the IM3 maturity assessment, right? So, and use the look and feel on this government site page here, which I've given as an example. So it's gone through and it's built me a website. So it's, it's done all the things. It's written all the React.js code. It stood up a server. It stood up a database backend. It's populated different pieces of information in there, et cetera, et cetera. And just to get to the end, I actually had a couple of goes at this. So I'll show you very quickly what it built. This was its first attempt. As you can see, there's no banner at the top. The look and feel is not the same as the Victorian government websites. The bottom is, down here, but it's missed out a couple of things. But nothing operates on this website. So I had a second go at it, and this was the second go. It's lost all of the look and feel information, but it does have much better functionality. So it's got a couple of active buttons up here, including a menu. You can start the assessment. It'll jump into the questionnaire. You can enter information. If you say next, for example, it's got some validation, which jumps up and says, you can't go to the next step until so there's some business logic in there, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm not suggesting you would use Manus to write yourself a website, but for prototyping with your internal or external clients, this is great. I mean, very quickly, I think it just took an hour in total runtime. Most of the time I was making coffee or drinking it. For prototyping, this is terrific. And, once you've got this active site up and running, you can tweak with the CSSs and some images and so forth, and turn this into something that's really quite impressive for your internal stakeholders. You put this in front of them, gives them a real indication of exactly what it is you're trying to do. All right, how are we doing for time, Jana?
And we still have 15 minutes. And just a quick one, Zeni is asking, what model are you using? Is it any particular model of Manus?
For Manus, the one that I chose, give me 1 second. What was it? I don't actually remember, I'm sorry. I can find out, and I can answer that question in the chat afterwards if you like. But I think for the entity relationship diagram, I use the default model. For the interactive website, I don't actually remember. I'm sorry. I'll find out.
We can put it in the comments.
We'll put it in the comments later. Yeah, we can find out.
Yeah, and we can also put the link on this tool. And Rohan is asking, and Vinod saying, really like that example. Here you go for your EID generation.
Excellent. So look, this is, as I said, this is not for serious coding, but it does help you do very quick and dirty prototyping, POC type of work, which can be very powerful. It will also generate code. For code generation, to be honest, I'd probably use something like Claude 3.7, which is quite good at coding, depending on what you're writing. If you're writing Python code, you're writing, sort of more centralized stuff, React.js, etc. I would use that. If you're using something more esoteric, DDLs, for example, let's say you want to fire up a database backend and start playing with that, then almost anything does a fair job at that. ChatGPT does a reasonable job. All right, so I'm just going to move to the last thing here, which is a demonstration of more visualization stuff. So we talked before about using something like Manus to do visualization. In one case, of course, visualizing in a Visio diagram. In the other case, a prototype site of some kind. In this case here, I wanted to put together a diagram, a picture for this presentation. And so this is the prompt that I gave it. Draw a picture of an enterprise architect sitting at her desk with documents piled up, surrounded by AI tools, imagining something complex. And this is the image that it generated for me. This is ChatGPT 4.0. And I would encourage you to play with the different model variations for this kind of task. They do change, so new versions come out, but also they have slightly nuanced performance when it comes to certain kinds of things. So if you're trying to do something abstract and conceptual, in my view, 4.0 does a fairly good job. If you're trying to do something much more grounded and analytical, then I'd probably be moving across to Midjourney or one of those kinds of things where you're looking at reference images as a basis. But this is what it produced. But I interacted with it a little bit more just to streamline what it was doing. And I asked it to use a soft burnt orange to red color palette. And the reason is that's our color palette. Excuse me, that's from here on. This is what it gave me. It's not a bad effort.
Raspberry, Brian. Raspberry.
Sure. Okay. The screen may have rendered it that way, or maybe it's just made a slight mistake. But it does segue into my next point, which is about the level of precision and guidance that you give it. So my next interaction was to say, okay, I'm going to upload this image. This is one of the stock photo images that we use. If you've seen any of our presentations, you'll often see this on the front page of the pack. It's a reference image. Now, what I don't like about these is, you run out of them pretty quickly when you're putting together presentations all the time, which EAs do. You've got a library of reference images. They tend to get old pretty quick. Generating something new and contextually relevant to the presentation that you're doing for your internal stakeholders or your external clients, whichever kind of EA you are, that's incredibly powerful. It shows you've actually fitted it to the presentation. It's not just sort of generic replay that a lot of people suffer from. So I've said, redo the diagram using the girl in this image. And this is what it gave me. From the original image up here, it's moved to this, which is a pretty good cartoon, let's say, representation of what this girl looks like. I then said, use a more photorealistic style. And so it's come up with this. Very nice. And then I've said, finally, redo the image using the color palette for the background. And I've given them the exact values of our color palette that our graphic designers used from here on. And sure enough, this is the final image. And that's the image you will have seen at the beginning of this presentation, which we included. Now, this whole thing took, I'm a bit of a Gumby at this particular task, to be honest, but this probably took 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. It's not a huge investment to get a customized image that is crafted and relevant for the concepts of the presentation that you're about to put in. I think, adding that to PowerPoint presentations or to other documents can be quite impactful. All right, so that's our whistle-stop tour from beginning to end of all the different kinds of categories of tools. As I say, the specific tools that I've shown here, I'm not endorsing them. They're just good examples, I think, of that particular category. There are many tools in each of those categories that you can use, but it gives you a bit of a flavor of how you might use these in your everyday EA tasks.
Thank you, Brian. We have time probably for 2 questions from the audience. So if you have some questions, pop it in the comments. Phil is asking the difference between Perplexity and ChatGPT. I think you already mentioned it on this slide, but if you want to just so quickly remind, how would you choose?
Perplexity is a tool, whereas ChatGPT is a tool and a model, although strictly speaking, GPT is the model. Perplexity, you can choose a range of the tools. So if you could share my screen again, Jana, if you wouldn't mind, I'll jump to Perplexity. All right, so this is the interface for Perplexity here. You can choose the model in here, and it's got quite a range. Like, it's pretty impressive. 4.0 is the one that I was using just there. It will use Gemini, which is Google's model, of course. It'll even use Grok 2. Grok 3 is coming. I know that's been released, but it's coming. It has some reasoning models as well. R1, I've never used R1. I hear mixed reports. I'm not sure. Claude 3.7. Awesome, as I said, for some tasks, particularly things like code generation and so forth. And then Sonar. Sonar is a quick model. Depends on how much precision you need and what kind of a task you're looking for. So your range of models in Perplexity.
Perfect. Mark is asking, what advice would you give to enterprise architects trying to keep up with the Gen AI rapid pace, roll out new tools fast, and keep the architecture solid and well-governed?
I'm really sorry, and I didn't quite get the end of what you were saying there.
Well-governed. Solid. Keep the architecture solid and well-governed.
Oh, well-governed. Okay, sorry. Yes. Look, I mean, the governance questions of enterprise architecture don't go away. They're exactly the same as they have ever been. So, how do you manage your repository? How do you manage life cycle of artifacts? How do you manage, control instruments like, tech debt and all these other kinds of things? They're exactly the same as they have ever been. What you can do is fast track some of the quotidian aspects of putting that information together and maintaining that information. To the best of my knowledge, EA tools, EA repository tools, let's say, things like, Alex or System Architect, Alphabet, those kinds of tools do not yet incorporate AI. But I know that Orbis, so Orbis I've used for many years, great piece of kit. It's a little expensive, but it is good. They are actively putting AI in at the moment. It's not ready for release, but it will be. My guess is sometime later this year or maybe early next year. So does that answer that question?
I guess it gives an idea. We're running out of time. One more question. Yeah. I think that's a burning question for a lot of people. Brian, how do you answer the data privacy and security that CTOs and CIOs would ask for use of these tools?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and again, I would go back and start using the tools. So recently, we did some work for a UK client. I'm not familiar with UK privacy regulations. They have their own version of GDPR, I think. Is the AI Act, but they are not subscribers to that. However, we anticipated that they would be. There are a number of other sort of new challenges that arose working in the UK theatre, and for that, using, in that case, I think I actually used Perplexity quite a lot. Manus wasn't released, of course, and I used ChatGPT. And what I was asking, the way I was getting it to do it is to say, to my point before, you are a consultant working in the UK in the data space as an enterprise architect, or whatever it was, the role that we had at that time, and you're building a governance framework for a retail client that has to conform to EA regulations and GDPR. Right? So you make the thing quite rounded, and then not only do you get a fairly good précis of the information that you can start with, and it's only a start, right? It doesn't solve all your problems, but it gives you a good start. Not only do you get that, you get references as well. And one of the reasons that I like Perplexity a little bit more than ChatGPT for that kind of task. So ChatGPT I like for things like do me a slide pack, for example. It's much better at that than Perplexity. But Perplexity is better at research. So if I ask Perplexity what I've just described, it'll come back with 20 references to standards and governance frameworks and things that I need to know about in that context that I can then use. It speeds things up quite remarkably. If I was going to do that myself, that might be a day's work, just going out there and pulling together the sources and the pieces of information, and then reading through it. You still have to do the reading, but it shortens the research task. I can't hear you, Jana. Might be my end.
I muted myself.
You muted yourself. Thank God, I thought it was my end.
Just in case, yeah. Last question from Justin. Would you consider using an offline LLM to use within an EA function that can understand the custom environment so that it's just answering based on the client rather than going online?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would, for a number of reasons. Some of the tools that I've shown today, Manus would be a good example. There are data sovereignty issues there. There are other privacy aspects as well that you're going to have to be aware of. And for some clients, they won't be tolerable. For some organizations, you're working for, they won't be tolerable. For those environments, you might want to consider that. However, be aware that when you do that, you are going to have to allocate quite a few resources. So if you're doing something local, you can bring the models across. You don't have to retrain from scratch. Well, you can, but it's going to cost you $10 million. So don't do that. You can bring the models across. You can then do something like fine tuning. Now, I'm not a big fan of fine tuning. It's kind of died away as a technique now. There are some better versions of fine tuning. LoRa is one of them. So these are low-ranked adapters. These are ways of kind of shortcutting the fine tuning task and focusing on very specific domains of information. But doing that is a very non-trivial step to take. Then you can augment those systems with something like RAG. You can use GraphRag to try and build conceptual models, etc. But there's a lot of work to do if you're going to bring that into the local space. The beauty of these tools is a lot of that has been done and is continually refined at an extremely rapid pace. So, each month there's a new release with new things that they can do. So yes, but think about what you're getting into. I think you're muted again, Jana.
Thank you, Brian. Trying to make any background noise. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us today. Please feel free to still put some questions. We can try to take it offline. Valeria is sending some nice comment to Brian. Impressive endeavor, Brian. These Gen AI hacks are highly transferable for business architecture. Great to see practical techniques that enhance analysis, uncover insights faster, and support more informed design decisions. If you feel like putting some nice comment to Brian, please feel free. There is no There is no time limit on that. You can spend another 15 minutes after we finish live stream to sending nice comments to Brian. So that's totally allowed. And if you so I've noticed there's definitely a few questions about the privacy and data. So that could be another topic of our streams, trying to bring those streams every month. So if you're thinking about a particular topic that's in your mind, or maybe you have some questions based on this demo, please put in the comments. The feedback is important for us, and it's also help us to choose the next topic. And if we can make the topics relevant to our audience, it's always win-win situations. As I mentioned, our next event will be in May, so probably second week of May. I'll post it next week. So to get notified, so to not miss our exciting next event, make sure to, of course, follow on us on LinkedIn. There is a lot of activities there, but also we have a meetup group that you can join. And we have a meetup groups for each country as well. So we have a meetup group for Australia, New Zealand, and UK. So we specifically created 3 different groups, so you can join by your country, so you can attend our face-to-face events as well. So which is a lot of fun. And we had a great event back in December, and Women in Architecture event just a few weeks ago. So make sure to join the meetup group in your country. And we're definitely planning a few more face-to-face events. I think next one will be in Sydney, so keep an eye. Of course, you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if it's your preferable way to consume information. And of course, if you're looking for some exciting new opportunity in enterprise architecture or AI architecture as well, feel free to connect and message me on LinkedIn. If LinkedIn messaging isn't your thing, you can also reach out to us via email, talent@FromHereOn.com. So reached out if you want to work with us. I'm always happy to chat. Brian, any last words of wisdom from you? Because before we finish that stream.
I'm not sure about wisdom, but look, the main thing here is I think there's incredible potential for AI in a lot of different areas of enterprise architecture to make your life much easier. Get a running start on a lot of the tasks. I find just getting started in some of these things can be quite a challenge, and it's super helpful for that. And watch this space, because every month there's a new release of something, a new tool, a new platform of some kind, new models that have different modalities. This stuff is moving so incredibly quickly. So just keep an eye on things. You never know, something you thought was impossible, suddenly becomes possible, and you'll be the better for it. So thanks, everyone. I hope that was useful. And if you have any questions, please contact me.
Thank you. And thank you for posting thank you. So it's always nice. Again, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month. Stay tuned.
Bye.